Okay. Adopted Son, Part 3. In Part 1, we learned about what were the Branch Davidians in 1981, when Vernon Howell, the future David Koresh, showed up as a student. We learned that there was an invisible prophet wanted sign, so to speak, hanging at Mount Carmel. In Part 2, we spent an entire episode just to explain Vernon's use of Isaiah 8 concerning his affair with Lois Roden, and also how he went on to use it as a defense against those who would doubt his inspiration. If you don't believe, you must be one of those filthy Uriah the priest types. So, on to Part 3 today. We're going to tell the story of what happened between Lois and Vernon as a romantic couple, essentially a married couple. So that's what I'll start with. There was no legal marriage, going to the courthouse, and so to speak. But Perry Jones, again, who I mentioned in previous episode 1, Perry Jones told me about Lois Roden commenting that David Koresh was a son raised up out of the earth. Well, Perry also told me one time that Vernon Howell, in this case, this is who he was, when he saw Lois and Vernon together during this time, it was like they were a married couple. They behaved that way. Okay, so that's his testimony. He was there. It makes sense. She was in love. Yeah. Her husband had died about 5 years previously, and she was alone, because when you're a leader of a group, right? I mean, it is a lonely position because everybody is serving you in some capacity, and I mean, who's there with you to identify with you? I mean, Vernon could be very charming, absolutely. He could be a really nice guy. I'll admit that. When he wasn't worried about, the things that were his darker side. In other words, I gotta make sure everybody, toes the line and trying to push himself. But I mean, he could be human. He had a great sense of humor. The problem with his sense of humor is that since he kind of believed that we shouldn't joke, this thing in his head about joking is wrong, and it would like block that. But I mean, I remember one time I was in the kitchen at the Herring House and I saw him joking around with Floyd Houtman and others, because Floyd was a really funny guy. Floyd was a great guy. He was and he was telling one of his stories. It's just and Vernon is just cracking up, just so human, such a great memory. Yeah, just I mean, it's sad because it's like a kind of an image of what things could have been instead of the way things turned out. Unfortunately, because when you're fighting, who's Vernon's worst enemy? In my opinion, it's him. He's his own worst enemy. I don't know if he kind of was a little bit aware of this when he spoke of himself after he got his message. In other words, after September 1983, he would speak of himself as he had been when he first showed up at Mount Carmel, and he would say things. There wasn't, 2 words didn't come out of my mouth. One wasn't one that was completely stupid, and the other half stupid. So he knew he had problems, but then this message, as I said previously, gave him a purpose. It gave him a sense of purpose, something to focus on. And so he did change. He no more crying all night long and praying to God, but in reality, his problems actually didn't go away. They just kind of changed in terms of how they manifested themselves, in my opinion. So yeah, married couple. I have some notes over here I've made, so I'll be referring to those. I made some notes just to organize what I'm going to say because I've collected together all my memories about this time. It's not written down in an account, so you can't. This is not documented. There wasn't a scribe, there wasn't a court reporter running around documenting these things. Vernon himself wasn't a writer. Nobody kept a journal. We Branch Davidians weren't that kind of people. We just weren't. Okay. Now, at one point, there was a trip to Israel. I don't know when this was. Again, it would have been sometime between September of 83 and January of 84. Because January of 84 was when Vernon married Rachel. So there was a trip to Israel. Lois took Vernon to Israel. There was an incident where Lois got jealous because this is the source in this case is Vernon himself telling the story later. She got jealous, accusing him of kissing a woman. And he admitted yes, he had kissed a woman, but it was on the cheek, because she said, well, you did kiss a woman. It was right here. That's exactly the kind of motion when he was describing it. That's what he did, to try to have a punchline. Oh, well, it wasn't really a kiss. Yeah. So I can't tell you much about that other than she was jealous. Obviously the issue would be that she's 67 years old, right? So other young women being around would be perceived to be a threat, obviously. There was another incident where they were together driving, and Vernon had this epiphany about his message. Again, this is him describing this. And he said, well, with this message, the one he had just come up with, I can make love to every woman in the world. I mean, he was always thinking in those terms. But he was saying, well, I was really high, my thoughts were in heavenly places, so to speak, and she was very offended. Lois Roden was very offended. How, oh, that's horrible, I tend to agree more with her, actually, because, well, if it's spiritual love, then why aren't you talking about the men as well? This is a foreshadowing, in my opinion. But anyway, I'll leave it there. During their romance, probably earlier on, Lois Roden gave Vernon a necklace as a token of love. I think it was a Star of David. Branch Davidians didn't wear jewelry typically, but we could wear Stars of David. That came down in '77 when Lois Roden began her message. So Branch Davidians started wearing Stars of David. My father had one made for my mom, gold, solid gold, Star of David, double layer. It's like 2 Stars of David, flat, and then mounted together with studs in between the points of the stars, so they give it a 3-dimensional effect. And then in the middle, a beautiful diamond, big sucker, and it would sparkle. Woo! Yeah, little. He must have, man. Oh, my parents made so much money. Anyway, yeah, because it was expensive, obviously. Another thing that happened, and again, I'm not sure about the chronology of this event. Okay, it could have been maybe shortly after he eloped with Rachel, which we'll get to that, but it might have been before. I don't know. But this is another thing that Vernon described, and other people also confirmed this particular event. Okay. What had happened is Vernon was not at New Mount Carmel. This is during the beginning of his message. He's not there. And so Lois Roden is there with the Branch Davidians, and they're having meetings, and she's mad about something. I don't know what. She's angry that Vernon's, when he gets back here, he's going to get it. I mean, she's just, whew. Because and Perry confirmed this, and others confirmed this event and everybody, and like Clive Doyle, for example, has confirmed this, and everybody's like, whoa, boy, when Vernon gets back, he's really going to get it, man. Everybody's like waiting for the this big confrontation. When Vernon gets back, he's really going to get it. He apparently had done something really bad or naughty, right? I don't know, but at least from Lois Roden's perspective, pretty serious. Okay, well, now, and then the way that Vernon told it is that while he was gone, he felt like something was wrong. Okay, take that as you will. So he went back, and the meeting comes, and now again, Vernon's going to give a presentation, one of his messages in the study, and he's up there, and Lois Roden, and everybody's ready. Okay, here we go. And Lois Roden walks into the room and takes her seat, and everybody's like, wait a minute, what happened? Yeah. Vernon told this story as an example of the kind of behavior that she was exhibiting. And it's not just his word, because other people confirmed this a bit strange behavior. And I can only, if I was to psychoanalyze her, I'd say, yeah, she's just conflicted. On the one hand, because again, this is a super strong-willed woman. I used to roof with Clive Doyle back in the day in '85, and he would tell me stories. And one of the stories he told me about the old Roden days, during the 70s, is Lois and Ben Roden would fight. I mean, couples get mad, but I mean, she had a temper. So she would begin to load up the station wagon, she's moving out, because they had apartments in Odessa, Texas, that she could have gone to live. And as she's loading up, Ben Roden's like, "You're not going anywhere," and he's having George, the son, unload as she's loading in this carousel. One time she got angry and some road rage. She injured herself in the cheek with the gear shifter. I don't know, because she was mad, driving erratically or something. So yeah, a woman with a temper. I remember one time in the 70s, we were and she was in California, and I was very young, and I didn't really know her very well. This is one of the first times I ever saw Lois Roden. And we were at a park, a public park, and we were having meetings in this structure that you could rent. And down below the structure, there was a park area where there were benches, and there were some teenagers who apparently were doing weed, and she got a stick and went out there. And I don't remember her doing anything, but boy, she was like ready to go, kids. Rah. So yeah, fiery woman. Okay, so let's get back on track here. All right. Now, unfortunately, there came a night, and I can't tell you his specific motivations. It might have been a voice. I don't know. There came a night when Vernon decided to leave. And he didn't leave, during the daytime and say, "Lois, this isn't working out. I'm going to go marry Rachel." No, unfortunately, it was in the middle of the night, in the dark, secretly. And Vernon left Lois Roden's house and went to Perry Jones. And this would have been, I don't know, the beginning of February '84, roughly. I had an exact date for their marriage somewhere, I don't know, but it's early '84. And so again, this is him talking, and also Perry confirmed this. Oh yes, there was a voice, because he said, Perry, or called him Pop, maybe. He did used to call him Pop. You know, God told me to marry Rachel, and I'm scared. You know. And yeah, they eloped. So, and Rachel's 14 years old. Yeah. It's funny. You might have seen the earlier video where, in his efforts to court a female at Mount Carmel when he first came, he first approached my wife, but she wasn't interested. Because he married Rachel, from then on, in his mind, somehow assumed, or like, you know how you like play psychological games with yourself in order to justify what you're doing. So all of a sudden, Rachel becomes like an adult in his brain because she's getting married, and then my wife is still a child in his brain. But every now and then he would realize that my wife was actually older than Rachel because they grew up together. And he'd be like, "Wait a minute, you're older than my wife." Like he would he would like snap into reality. Like, wait a minute. In other words, he'd realize how young Rachel really was. You know, it was weird. I saw it a couple of times. Like, what the hell? You can't figure out. You know. Anyway, because yeah, he's obviously marrying her very young. Yeah, and then of course in Texas, at least in 1984, you can do this, right? You can with parental consent, and Perry gave consent. I mean, at this point, that's the thing. Vernon had Perry. I mean, yeah, and it was incidents like what I described, where Lois Roden get mad, you know, okay, I'm gonna show Vernon a thing or two and then retreat. And these were cited as things that kind of shifted the allegiance of the Branch Davidians over to Vernon, those types of things, because Vernon would stay calm, stay focused, you know, where Lois Roden could get emotional. I mean, she's a woman in love, insecure. So this is, I mean, you could look at it as psychological manipulation if you wanted to, if you want to take it to that level. I can only speculate. Okay. Well, they take a blue Chevy van that belonged to Lois Roden, and they elope. They go off. They drive off into the night, and yeah, they get married, get a marriage license, all that stuff. So I guess you could say he kind of stole the van. I mean, he didn't have permission to take it. So anyway, and then one of the things that he did, this will be important later. Yeah, I mean, you know how when you're having a relationship with somebody, you know, and they give you a token of affection, of course, such as an engagement ring or whatever. Typically, it's good form when you break up to give it back. Say, you know, here you go. That would be a wise thing to do. Vernon liked to talk about wisdom all the time. I would think that would be a wise thing to do. Don't you think that would be? Well, this is going to come up later, so let's get, you know, just to let you know. He gave this necklace to Rachel. Vernon doesn't have any money, okay? He doesn't have a job. The last time he was really employed steadily would have been from the time he got kicked out of Harriet's in about February 81 to around July of 81. And the reason why he is because he was working hard to establish a normal life so that he could take the love of his life, the pastor's daughter from years ago, to this place and live and be together and be happy. And of course that crashed and burned. So ever since then, he had not really been steadily employed. You know, may have worked odd jobs here and there, but and he didn't have any money of his own. So yeah, he gave her the necklace that Lois gave him. Yeah. So now Rachel is walking around wearing this necklace, and Lois can see Rachel walking around wearing this necklace. I don't know if Rachel knew that it had been given to Vernon by Lois Roden. Even if she did, she's 14. So how much is she going to really understand? I didn't even understand it myself that much when I tell you the story that comes up. So, okay, so that's the basically the arc of the relationship. Okay. As again, I never spoke to Lois Roden about this, but I did see some things that happened later on. Obviously, she was crushed and very hurt and upset. It was during this time that Vernon went to California, and that's when I met with him. He was using that van, as a matter of fact, the one that he stole. Rachel wasn't with him. He left her behind in Texas. Like I said, he's in California trying to spread his message. Rachel's walking around Mount Carmel with this necklace that Lois Roden gave her. Well, indirectly, right, by proxy. Lois Roden gave Rachel the necklace through Vernon, essentially, is what happened. Okay. So, for a short time, from the time that they got married, Rachel and Vernon, until Vernon left New Mount Carmel at Passover 84, they Rachel and Vernon lived together like a married couple, and in a house there next door to Perry, I think, or something like that. Some house on Mount Carmel that they used, and try to have this settled down and have the married life. I think, as any young girl might do, Rachel's trying to get domesticated and settle down and take care of her husband and all those types of things. I mean, this is, again, you have to remember, this is she's almost 15. Let's say she's 14 and a half or something. So eventually Passover 84 rolls around. And as you know, so initially Rachel didn't know about the affair between Vernon and Lois. Now you might say, well, if they're walking around acting like a married couple, well, again, that's Perry seeing this because he's an adult with adult mindset seeing them together. Children or young girls are not going to notice this. So it was around this time that, well, what's weird is that Vernon actually told my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, to inform Debbie, my wife, about the affair. I guess he didn't want her hearing rumors. So my wife found out about the affair between Lois and Vernon. And then Rachel found out shortly thereafter. She actually came to my wife crying, because she didn't know. So now she knows that her new husband had been previously romantically involved with Lois Roden. And I mean, it's basically just it's basically just a situation to unload your feelings, right? Just need somebody to vent to. Rachel and my wife actually weren't close at this point, but I mean, Rachel knew that she could go talk to her. Anyway. So then shortly after that, during the Passover of 1984, and I was there when this happened right afterwards, Rachel is crying because I was there with my sister, and I'm young. I'm 19. My sister's 15. Rachel's 15. We're just hanging around together, teenagers, just whatever. And Rachel comes to us crying, sobbing, and saying, "Oh, she ripped the necklace off my, Lois Roden had told Rachel, hey, come here, and come here, little girl, lured her over and then snatched that thing right off her neck. I just thought of the song "Jagged Little Pill" by Alanis Morissette to describe a breakup, right? Just a song of raw emotion and pain. That's the kind of thing that Lois Roden's going through, even though, of course, the song is in the future. But yeah, it just occurred to me, if you want to know, if you want a taste of the kinds of raw emotions and pain and suffering that Lois Roden's going through, just listen to "Jagged Little Pill" by Alanis Morissette and what she's going through when she's having to go through this breakup, you know. That's kind of what it is. Just, you know, and that's a truth. That's truth. Vernon did get up in the meeting that afternoon and condemned Lois Roden, you know, and even reenacted the little scene, you know, come here, you know, and condemned the whole thing. Here's, well, I'll stick my judgment in here because I feel very strongly about this. This is his fault, okay? For someone who went on so much about wisdom, look, idiot, when you break up with somebody, you give the token of affection back to them. Everybody knows that. Okay, I didn't know that when I was 19 because I was 19. But yeah, we as adults know that when you break up with somebody and they give you a token of affection, you give it back. You don't turn around and hang it over the neck of your new love and then parade her around, and she probably didn't even know, in front of the woman. I mean, this is a perfect example of how clueless Vernon could be right here. Okay, this is one of my primary points. I think a lot of you, maybe not everybody's going to agree. There's always, you know, it's the internet. What are you going to do? But a lot of you are going to think, yeah, that's pretty, you know, messed up. Yeah, but hey, my excuse was that I was just a kid. Why all the other adults aren't standing up and saying, excuse me, but everybody knows that you give back necklaces to people when you break up with them. Don't you know that? But nobody did that because already, you know, even at this early stage, it's Vernon and he's inspired and he's the prophet. Like, ugh. Right. I never had the view that everything that he did was absolutely perfect. And with no, I mean, I just couldn't see things that way. That was one of my problems. But again, at the time, I thought that Lois Roden was being mean. Yeah, because, you know, I don't know anything about the world yet. I wasn't experienced, as Vernon would point out many times. Anyway, and during this time, Vernon has this van. He's kind of taken possession of it, the one that he kind of stole. I mean, Lois Roden could have filed a stolen vehicle report on him and gotten it back if she wanted to, but she didn't. So anyway, and again, this is just about between Lois Roden and Vernon, so there's other things that are happening that I'm not going to talk about right now. So, as you may remember, Vernon has to leave New Mount Carmel voluntarily because he can see that things are getting bad for him, especially George is not happy. So he leaves and gets a house in Waco, the Herring House, and that's where we end up living there for the next several months until Passover 85. And he's still got this van. Okay. Well, one day, Vernon assigned me the task to return the van because Lois had been asking for it back. You know, it was hers. So Vernon finally decided, yeah, okay, it's time to give the van back. And then he had me drive it to Mount Carmel. I drove it right up to the front gate there and met George Roden's sons. Here you go. Here's the van. Gave him the keys, and that was it. So then very shortly after that, I hear phone calls, and Vernon's on the phone with Lois Roden. Sister Roden, thus saith the Lord, give the van back. What? We just gave it back. Yeah, apparently the voice came to him. I can only assume, because he certainly seemed very earnest about it. And now she's supposed to give the van back. if I was to speculate, I would say that maybe he thought that if he gave it back to her, you know, oh, well, she would be like, oh, well, you've given it back to me, so here you go. I mean, you can keep it. No, 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 no. She kept it. She didn't give it back ever. Man, he was like a dog with a bone with that for probably a week or so, just on the phone every now and then. Give the van back. And it's this cognitive dissonance thing, where God says something's supposed to happen in the voice, but it doesn't happen. Like, so that's a disconnect, like, what do I do? Like, God says I'm supposed to get the van back, but the van's not coming back. It's just like God said I'm supposed to get this certain girl, we're supposed to get married, but it doesn't happen. And it creates this tension in Vernon's brain, because he's facing, and this is my opinion, he's facing this reality that the voice that communicates to him isn't always right. And then he has to create, it's like when he had a dream, again, with the girl. He had a dream. I don't know if I told this dream before. Let me tell the dream really quickly, because this is about the voice and coming up with coping mechanisms for why maybe the voice might be wrong. It's not really wrong, because like in this dream, during this time when he's going through these struggles with this young girl that he's not able to be with, he has a dream where he sees an amber cloud. This is his description. He told the story many times. He sees an amber cloud, and he falls in love with the cloud. And even in the dream, he's like, it's silly to be in love with a cloud, of course, but he can't help it. He's just in love with the cloud. He gives himself to the cloud. He throws himself into the cloud. The amber cloud enfolding itself. It's from the Bible. I think Ezekiel. Like, this storm cloud that's just turbulent, and there's lightnings and it's just coming toward. He just throws himself into the cloud. He's in love with the cloud, and he's in there in the cloud, and it's wonderful. And then he comes up against a female figure, and it's like and this wasn't necessarily a sexual description, okay, but it's like a perfect fit, body against body, arms, legs, all come together, click, like this, like you found your soulmate. And then he opens his eyes, and it's the girl, and he becomes immediately disappointed, because this is the source of his frustration and trouble. And then he hears a voice, there's something more you have to learn. Yeah, so this is kind of like a coping mechanism, well, God is leading him along with the voice, with the, and trying to shape him, mold him, bring him down this pathway. Like a loving father teaching his son through life lessons, right? That's essentially what we're talking about. So again, this must be another one of those, I guess, this wanting the van back and not getting it back. He never did get it back. But he was very upset about that for a while, but she wasn't playing. It was around this time also that Lois Roden came out with another tract, and she had not done so for like a year, maybe. It was called Merkabah. That's like the God's traveling chariot, Merkabah. She had published other tracts with this title, like this was Merkabah Part 4 or something like that. Now, Vernon couldn't just like if I wrote him a letter later on, you saw it when I showed his response to me, the fart letter. He couldn't do that to Lois Roden. He's got to be a little more respectful. So we did have a study, and he got up in front of the group, and we read from the letter, and I have that on tape, actually. I should post that. It's really boring, but I'll put it on the alternate channel for those who want to listen. And I might not comment much on it. It takes a long time to put the comments in. We'll see, because I'm trying to study for a new job, and I don't have much time. But anyway, okay. So during this time, when she writes this tract, there is a brief kind of reconciliation between Lois Roden and Vernon. And we even rented a place to meet, and she gave us a study, the group, the one that had broken away from her. And she's also inviting some of the men in the group, Floyd Houtman, for example, and also Stan, Sylvia, to go to Odessa and help her out with some things. They're staying with her, and these are handymen. They know how to use a hammer and saw. They're helping her fix things up, and there's a bit of a working between the two there, but it doesn't last very long. Again, it's the same old resentments, control, each one wanting control, and it's just there's no compatibility here. But I will say that Lois Roden showed a tremendous ability to be calm and to put her feelings aside and to be civil and to I remember one time I stepped on a nail and I got a really bad injury. I should have gone to the doctor, obviously, but I mean, we were kind of like, you don't need to go to doctors because we'll just use the power of prayer. That wasn't always the case. We would go to doctors, but in this case, for some reason, it didn't get infected. But she gave me made a poultice. It's called a potato poultice. I don't even know if it works, but you're supposed to put it on the wound. It's supposed to suck the poisons out. I'm doubtful about this, but whatever. Anyway, she was very nice. One time, let me tell you this other story, because I'm trying to give Lois Roden's character here. My father, unfortunately, used to like to run me down. Yeah. Anyway, and we were in Lois Roden's kitchen. This would have been back in 79, maybe, or 80 or 81. I don't know. Early days. And my father's running me down in front of Lois Roden, and I'm sitting there having to take this, teenager. Maybe some of you have been there. It sucks. Anyway. Lois Roden gets mad at my father because she can see, everybody could see it. It's ridiculous. Could you just lighten up a little bit, for crying out loud? The way my father treated me, you would think that I was out every night running around, stealing cars, doing drugs, having to get bailed out of jail or something. I was a good kid, man. I'm not kidding. I never did anything wrong. I was so boring. Anyway, he's like, I'm tired of you running him down. I'm going to start raising him up, and he just, what's he going to do? He just has to sit there and take it himself, right? The prophet's telling him to cut the crap, and I was like, yeah. Oh yeah. Lois was a good woman. She had faults, of course, but between the two, Vern and Lois, I think the character for Lois is definitely much preferable. So again, this period of cooperation around the time she released the tract, and Vernon's having, so the weird thing that's going on here is that is she still a prophet or is she not a prophet? I mean, this is what he's having to deal with, right? When did she stop being a prophet? We don't know the answer to these questions, and I don't remember them ever being really seriously discussed, but when I look back, these are obvious questions. Well, she was inspired, and then you started your message, so did she become uninspired the second that you started talking, or was it when you left Mount Carmel? There's no answers to these questions. And he knew this. I think he knew this in the back of his mind. It's like, well, yeah, it's kind of floating out there. Like, what's the status of Lois Roden now? She writes a tract. Is this something that we have to? And it wasn't a tract saying, oh, Vernon's this and that, and you got to reject his message. It was just a separate thing. And I guess we ultimately ended up rejecting it because we kind of had to, right? Because otherwise she would be inspired, and then we'd have to listen to what she had to say, and we can't have that. So again, that's why we didn't end up cooperating ultimately. Now, it was about this time roughly, so within the next few months, that I witnessed something truly amazing that I never saw before or since between Lois and Vernon. So I need to explain this very carefully. This is really important. This is what I'll close with. Well, I won't. This will be I'm closing up now. I was with Lois and Vernon. It was just us three, except that I was kind of invisible at this point because they were focused on each other. And it was at a shop that one of the members had set up because he was an antique restoration person. So from the Herring House down the street there was a shop, and I was in there watching Lois Roden confront Vernon about his behavior. The whole thing. I'll read my note here. I witnessed where Lois confronted Vernon. He betrayed his guilt by his body language. You know, he's walking away from her, avoiding her gaze. Maybe not necessarily doing this, but I mean, he's trying to get away. I saw the truth that day, but was too young to process it. So it's her truth, and it was the truth. I can tell. You know, when you see two people interacting with each other, and you see one person and they've got the truth and the other one's ashamed, yeah, it's a truth that you just know it. You just see that and you're like, wow, this is what I was witnessing. And one of the things I don't remember everything that was said, but one of the things she said, because she's just, it's like, she's chasing him, not chasing, but I mean, she's walking away and she's following him, and she's talking the whole time she's following him. And I'm just, popcorn, not really. That's not my attitude. I mean, I'm just kind of like watching, it's like watching a train wreck. I don't know what to think really. Because remember, he's the prophet and I'm 19, and I don't know anything about romance and breakups and stuff. Plus, I guess the other thing is that, if it had been Vernon and maybe some young woman, then my brain would have shifted gears like, oh, okay, it's a breakup between, but this is Lois Roden. It's like a motherly figure. This is a woman I'd known since I was a child. So I'm seeing her pursue Vernon and to really give him the third degree. And I'm not in that mode, but yeah, letting him have it. And he's taken it. He's not, because this never happens. You don't confront Vernon without him coming back at you hard and arguing with you with every single thing you say. As Bonnie, his mother, said, legendary quote from his mother, Bonnie: Vernon, you'd argue with Jesus Christ. Yeah, absolutely. That was his personality, but in this case, he's just taken it. He has to, because it's the truth. And one of the things she said was, Vernon, you're the most selfish person I've ever known. Yeah, I would agree with her. He was bad, very self-absorbed. Anyway, this situation came to, I don't know what happened. It just diffused, She went home and whatever. Vernon reverted back to normal. Forgot about it. He never talked about it. He never said one word to anybody about this. And I don't think I really talked about it either. I kind of just stored it away, for future retrieval. I'm holding this little nugget of truth all my life now to tell you guys about it. So, unfortunately, this is, probably 85. Within another year, by 86, Lois Roden got cancer, breast cancer, and she didn't get treatment for it for whatever reason. I don't know the details. And then she died in later 86. I'll tell one last story. And I'll go into this more detail at some other point. In Passover 1986, she was at Mount Carmel. Excuse me. She was not at Mount Carmel. She was in Palestine, because that's where we ended up. We were in exile from Mount Carmel. And we were having a study. So what Vernon wants to do, again, this is to the show off. Wants to show Lois Roden that we're all in unity, right? The Branch Davidians, him in front of the congregation, teaching the congregation, and we're all, yes, it's the truth, except that I'm not there, because he says something wrong. It's wrong. It's a technical error. There's no getting out of it. He makes a mistake. Again, I mentioned this before. Like if you say 2 + 2 = 5, that kind of mistake. It's not a question of this symbol means that or whatever, a matter of Bible interpretation. This is a technical error where you're reading something wrong. You don't understand what you're reading because in this case, it's the King James is just sometimes very difficult for modern readers. That's all it is. It's not entirely his fault. And I'm like, no, isn't this, that, and the other? And oh man. So I destroy the illusion. Oh, wait a minute. There's this one idiot here who's not in unity with us. And then he gets really mad at me because, because I did this in front of Lois Roden. And now, because she was kind of, oh, you got a troublemaker here. Oops. I should have kept my mouth shut. Again, what am I going to do? I'm nerdy that way. I can't help it. And yeah, she, he was very upset with me. I had messed up his little image there of the perfectly united congregation. And then I saw her one more time when my daughter was born in the summer of '86. And she came to Palestine. Vernon wasn't there. She had brought some young man who was one of her latest disciples into the Holy Spirit message, the Holy Spirit feminine message, which is what she was still pushing that. But then in November, I think she passed. And I'll tell you, I have felt guilty about the way we treated her. But like I said, I was so young, I didn't realize till later. As I gotten older and looked back, I'm like, oh God, I wish I could say that I was sorry. Not that she was right about everything. I mean, she made mistakes. But, and even in the dealings with Vernon, she could have done things differently and been really more, I mean, whatever. It was her business how she did it. But yeah, that was the end of Lois Roden. And Vernon pretended that he was sorry. And because he got on the phone with the Roden children and was arguing with them. And said that he loved her, but because they, obviously they don't like him. This would be George Roden's children. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. And he was claiming that he loved her, but I don't think that he did. I think that he used her. Though maybe not intentionally. Maybe he thought you know how it is. Maybe he thought he loved her. He told himself that he loved her, but I don't really think that he did. So there you go. That's the end of the story. Next video will be Branch Davidian Christology. Next weekend. Till then.